You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, you just might. You get what you need. All right. That's on my wife and I's parenting playlist. We have a parenting playlist of great songs. That we often go back to. Man, I wish I just had a list of them right here. She has a record of them, but I'm not- there's a Radiohead one in there. What is it? There's a Beck one. It's Nobody's Fault But My Own. That's a great one. There's a good Radiohead song. Oh man, there's so many great gems. But another to my mind is, Bowie. Changes. Turn and face the change. Um, to talk about this is um, but um, the couple isn't satisfaction. Can't get no satisfaction as it relates to being. It also relates to being, and it also relates to getting related to people. Um, I did a little video on my own channel about the other day. Okay, this live stream isn't going to be super long, so I might open this up earlier, and I'll try to be succinct with what I have to say. Some of this is tied to like the little corner navel gazing that's been happening lately, and some of the complaints that have happened. Primarily, I mean, it's the usual cast of characters. Um, whether to name, whether not to name. I mean, anybody who knows anything knows. I mean, it's Mark, Manuel, Jacob. Though they're not part of the corner anymore, but also part of the corner and complaining about the corner and whatever. But it makes me think when I made my video about difficult people, it's related to that, obviously, but it's also related to like I'm a difficult person. I often say that to my wife. Everyone is and is not a difficult person. Identity of identity and non-identity, and there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. And Clem Snide, to be blessed is to be cursed as well. So a blessing is a curse. It just depends on how you're looking at it and how it manifests. You could think anything to be like, okay, let's say you're really physically beautiful and athletic and you're a professional athlete. Does that have negative side effects, things that you don't want? Yeah. What do you need? What is the line between wanting and needing? Do people really love you for you? I mean, this is a constant struggle famous, beautiful, famous people talk about. Do people love me for me, or do they just want to be famous? Do they just want money? Do they just want to come along beside me and get the benefits of whatever? Leadership, I think, is very often that same way. Leadership and authority. Who wants to be a leader? This is why a lot of times people will say you often want leaders who don't want to be leaders. Um, there's a great, I think it's a Tolkien quote. As an anarchist, there's a really great Tolkien quote. If you just like Google or internet search Tolkien on anarchy, this quote will come up because it talks about there's one from Lewis and there's one from Tolkien both. One of them talks about the benevolent dictator, where Lewis says, the benevolent dictator, the robber baron will at some point, when they get what they want, when they've robbed you, they'll leave you alone once they've gotten what they want. But the benevolent dictator will not cease to torture you forever for your own good. Um, that's a good one. And then there's also the Tolkien one. I think he talks more about that anyone who is seeking authority is the exact kind of person that you don't want in authority. I can't remember the exact quote. I need to look it up, and I don't want to spend a ton of time thinking about it. But so I spoke again. I spoke on the phone with Joey yesterday again. I've spoken with him a couple times recently, and I hadn't talked to him in a long time, and it was great. And I really love and value Joey and his wisdom. I miss him in this little corner, if I'm quite honest. But I completely respect and honor and see the wisdom in his desire to not be here. And he said it's really good for him, and that's great. And this is related, although not related. This isn't meant to like challenge anything that was talked about with Joey because everybody lives their own life, and I'm not telling anyone, I'm not prescribing for anyone to do anything. I'm just talking about my thoughts and speaking my mind and saying what I think primarily for me, and I don't even know what's good for me, or my kids, which, man, we'll see what kind of this parenting does for my kids because the way that I am here and the way that I talk about things is the way that I talk to my kids, and they're often like, "What are you saying? What do you want me to do? What's happening?" So so my anti-structuralist stuff will see the fruit of that in my children, I guess, although they have a very structured mother. Praise God. So because every blessing is a curse, there is no right way necessarily. There is and there isn't. So is what you want good for you, and how does that relate to safetyism? This is the main idea that I was coming up with to stream and how it relates to Christianity. According to Christianity, I think this is true. According to Christianity, what is best for you is your death. I mean, seriously, I don't know how much time people really spend meditating on that. Your salvation is the death of the old man, the false man. So in a sense, it's your death. Nothing. If you seek to gain your life, you must lose it. And if you want to save your life, you will, like everything will be lost. That's the safetyism that I'm talking about. I think most of the problems of the modern world, I don't know, I came up with this idea. I don't even know if it's an idea somewhere else. Spell check thinks it's not a word. Well, so it's another Lukeism. It's probably been said. But safetyism is this idea that you're wanting to guard against what you don't want, right? Most people don't want to die. There's a fear of death. They don't want to be hurt. They don't want to suffer. Um, I don't want bad things. And so you guard against that. Is there wisdom in that? Sure, there's a wisdom of a kind, but there is also a hidden wisdom, a secret wisdom, a foolish wisdom, maybe a wisdom of the cross that seems like folly to the world that is perishing. But to those who are being saved, it's the wisdom and the glory of God. First Corinthians. And I put a verse in there. First Corinthians First Corinthians is the book of the Bible I know the best. It's the one that I studied with the MacArthur study method back when I was more of a fundamentalist evangelical. I just read through it every day, nonstop, highlighted it, diagrammed it, did biblical arcing for like a month. Um, I should go back and just read it through again sometimes, just see the depths that are there. But it got thoroughly into me in all kinds of unconscious ways. And that whole book just like is fantastic. It's hugely formed me. And so the wisdom of the cross is folly, but it culminates somewhat in 1 Corinthians 15:22, whereas like for as in Adam all die, all will be made alive in Christ. The way that God has redeemed the world in Christ is that he has subjected everything to futility and death. That is the victory of Christ. The cross is futility and death. This is the tree of life. Um And I think very often in all of our safetyism and in all of our good intentions, we try to guard to that thing. So like I'm not saying like become suicidal, close your eyes and walk out into a street. That's not what I'm saying. But I think very often the way of the cross, the way of loving people, the way of self-sacrifice, the way of loving your enemies, the way of not waging war in a false way against your own conscience is gonna involve suffering and death. Loving difficult people is going to involve suffering and death. Forgiving people, which is part of love. If it's true that forgiveness is the rule that survives its own judgment, and I think this is true, or that the unforgivable sin is unforgiveness because the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Those are two sides of the same coin. Us being forgiven is forgiving others. Like I really think those two things are not in a transactional way, not like God will forgive us when we forgive others. It's a simultaneous reciprocity that happens at the same time. We find forgiveness as we forgive other people. Those two things happen at the same time. We understand what it is to be forgiven, to receive the grace of God as we forgive other people. I mean, can you honestly think of something that's harder? Think of the worst that you've been wounded, your safetyism, your fears, the worst that someone has ever wounded you, and you have to forgive them. Honestly, I think a lot of the drama in this little corner and people's complaints about all this and trying to define things and work things out and people wanting to quit and they went out from you because they were not of you is because people do not get what they want. And 1 Corinthians 13, what is love? Love is not insisting on its own way. We insist on our own way because of what we want, and then we don't get what we want. James also says this, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Is it not this? You want and do not have, and so you fight and you quarrel. When you don't get what you want, what do you do? Do you get resentful and bitter and break communion with people? Or do you forgive and die to yourself and learn to agape the other person and whatever they're saying and whatever they want into being, even if they're wrong? Again, are you playing this either or objectivist game where I'm right, you're wrong, and what you want, safetyism, is against me and my good? I don't know. I think we live in this world of and these are all things that we know but we don't know because we because we live in contrast to these things. Like how what Jordan Peterson said about resentment, all of us in this little corner know and have heard. But then do we become resentful? In this little corner, when people don't do what we want, do we resent them? So then I say, what the fuck are we doing here? This is often what I say. My buddy Jason says this all the time when it comes to the Bible or when it comes to anything, any assertion you have. What Jordan Peterson says about resentment, let's just take that as an example. Do you do you believe that? Then as my dad said growing up, show me the money. Because this is the thing. I was always back to the father episode of Luke's live streams, uh, about men's work and whatever, all that stuff, which actually just became about talking about dads. Um, my growing up show, because believe it or not, I was a big idea person, imagining. I was a dreamer, a big dream. I had a many talk big game. And you could see that was a really harsh thing, it was a really unloving thing. And in a way, Can you hear me now? No sound for 5 minutes? Now can you hear me? Can you hear me now? What the heck happened? It was like I was muted. I didn't even touch my computer screen. For 5 minutes? Crap. Okay. What was I ta audio. At least he's smiling. Oh, that's ridiculous. It's probably the best stuff I've ever said. Oh, jeez. Ridiculous. Okay. Did you hear me talk about, my dad and, show me money? Was I talking about that? Anything? I'll go back there. Let's repeat it. Satan. Jeez, good lord. So my dad growing up always when I started singing, like, at the very beginning, why is anyone here if they can't even hear what I'm saying? Man, that means people aren't here for, like, what I'm saying. Are you just here for the great audio quality in my hair? I heard the money part. Show me the money. Oh, great. Okay, I'll go back there. So my dad always used to say, "Show me the money," because I had a big imagination. I was always talking a big game, but I didn't have a good follow through, believe it or not. Big dreamer, ENFP. That's very true. So yeah, that's how I used to roll. Uh, and so you could say that was a really hard thing. That was a harsh thing for my father to do. Rather than what would I have wanted in that moment? Well, I would have wanted him to foster that and to like, you're a dreamer. Cool, dream. Go, positively reinforce me. That wasn't what my dad did. It was antagonism. It was to doubt my dream. It was to, uh, in a sense, put me down. But in a lot of ways, I'm thankful for that because it made me into what I am. Anti-fragility. Um, I think I brought up Sebastian Younger, and then I was saying forever that I couldn't remember the quote. The hard times or the good times. No, hard time. Good times. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men produce hard times, that whole cycle. Or like the Jordan Peterson thing of, when he speaks to people about the things that they most value in their life and that they love in their life, it's these difficult times they learn to endure through. Yeah, totally, exactly, N N Nicholas Taleb. Is that his name? Yeah. Shout out about anti-fragility. You don't want and that's a great idea. That's essentially what I'm talking about. You don't want to be the kind of person that, because Jordan Peterson says again, what I was trying to say is the difficult things in your life are often things that you're most thankful for having endured them. Um, And if you took those things aw so most people, when they look back on their life, like, "These difficult things that I went through are the things that I'm most thankful for." If you seek to constantly eliminate the difficult things from your life and the things that are against your well-being or your safety or your whatever, you're going to take away all the things about your that produce character, that produce endurance, that produce love, that produce that produce strength, weight training. I often say to my time, like, I try to put off working out every time I do it because I hate it doing it. Like electrical, going for a doing yoga, body fire, and stop is fun. I hate it. Absolutely hate it. All right, I'm gonna just try this. We are recrackling. Um, so you often push off these things that are really difficult for you, but you ought not to do that because those are the things that you're often. Hopefully, it's good now. It should be because I took out my headphones. Um, those are the things that often make you strong. And so, uh, man, I wish I feel like I said it best the first time. Warmer sound, nice. Okay, I'm gonna open this up because I'm not gonna have a lot of time here this morning. But the thing about Christianity that I think most baffles people. Again, it's that First Corinthians thing, First Corinthians 2. It's the wisdom of the cross. I don't think I think that Christians should not run away from things that are hard and bad for them. It's like in the book Loris, or it's the early church martyrs, or it's like when the plague happens. The Christians should be the people who are not trying to run away from the plague and stay alive. They are the people that are going into the plague, loving the people who are dying, not fearing death. Because if I live or I die, it's all Christ. So, like, if I go into the plague and I love these people and I help them and I get the plague and I died as Christ. I died sacrificing myself for those in need, for the brother. Love has nothing greater than this, and he lays down his life for his friend or his enemies. And so, even in this little corner, and with difficult people, and with hard people, with boundaries, with heresy, with excommunication, what do? Do you seek to get rid of the thing that is hard, that is bad, that is scary? The safetyism that's going to ruin you, that's going to destroy you. Do you seek to get rid of that? I I see that logic. Like, it makes sense, of course. But also, that reminds me of that Louis joke, of course, but maybe he does it in a funny way that's kind of a flip of it. But the same truth is there. So Louis has that joke of like peanut allergies. He's just like, of course, with peanut allergies at school, of course we should, protect them and they should sit at their own table and no one should eat peanuts and we should keep all that away from them and keep those peanut allergies safe. Those kids with peanut allergies safe, of course. But maybe if we just let everybody have peanuts and just ate peanuts everywhere and spread it all over, the people with peanut allergies would die and this would all be over. So like that's the joke. And of course, and so like that's terrible. But but maybe I think Louis is kind of playing on the same idea there. I'm not advocating to just like euthanize weak people. It's not the argument I'm making. Yeah. Now he's stealing Louis C.K. bits. I credited him, Grim. Jeez. Um, I think, I think, I think Christianity is antithetical. Is completely opposite to the safetyism that seeks to protect you from death. And I put in there. I need to go back and watch it, but there's a Peter Rollins fundamentalist podcast on the death drive, which is essentially this Freudian idea that is the opposite to the safetyism that tries to avoid death and bad things. The death drive is the thing that just runs to that. And what is that in us? Um, I think it's the part of us that knows that, again, transhumanism. What is that? Fear of death. We're going to use technology to escape death. I think that's a lie. I think that's a satanic lie. Like, what is the transhumanism of this little corner? How are we trying, what psychotechnologies and language and mechanisms are we trying? Here's the thing. Should we be so scared of the death of this little corner? That very fear may be the thing that destroys this little corner. That's what I would say. Uh, if it dies, it dies. I'm not that worried about it. Because then I'll just like the spirit moves where it will. You cannot control it. You can't control it. Um, okay, I'm gonna go back and read some of these comments here. I'm really sorry about the audio with this. I think I just need to stop trying to use my damn Bluetooth headphones because they're terrible. But I think I've been getting some pushback in the comments, which is fantastic. Because if I didn't like the pushback of this, everything that I'm saying would be a lie. Huh? Right? All right. These are luxury beliefs, maybe. I think I saw that in there. Mandy. I think Mandy's. I love Mandy. So let's see. We're here for the relational. Thank you, Neil. Uh okay. I'm just gonna skip where all the audio crap was. Um Loud and clear in the stratosphere. Okay. Show me the money. Yeah, my dad. Show me the money. We got it. The Simpson looking icon behind you. That is this thing. That is my daughter doing a like cut out pieces of uh, construction paper. She's making a picture of herself as an old lady. That's what that was, that she did a number of years ago, and it's a great piece of art. There's also this one over here. It's a little bird. It's probably hard to see, but he's kind of like wobbling, looking like he's doing this. And I call it the tipsy bird, the tipsy. It's like a baby bird looking thing. So Aaron says this is one of the ways in which Nietzsche's criticism of Christianity is arguably his criticism of Antichrist, the need for safetyism. Yeah, I think a lot of that is true. A lot of that is really true. Like I think conservatives. I mean, you could say this happens all the time with philosophers, whether it's Nietzsche or Kierkegaard. A lot of people are like, "Oh, you're." People with a more conservative temperament will say like, "Oh, you like the stuff that you're saying is like you're." People all like a conservative Christian would think Nietzsche is God is dead, right? They hear that little. That's all they know of Nietzsche, and they think he's like anti-Christian. No, I don't think so. For the replays, yeah. Oh my goodness. I truly think I kept trying to go back and correct and repeat the things where I was just talking to myself for 5 minutes. I need to get the NSA. The NSA probably has it recorded on my cell phone somewhere, and it's annoying. It's very annoying. Okay, absolutely, we need to embrace hardships. Yeah, but not in the theoretical, in your real relationships. Like, take these abstracts, take these generals, embrace hardships, and say, where do I need to embrace hardships in the particularity of whatever I'm going through right now? I just don't think people do that very much, you know? Like, that's truly the thing. So, like, take this for example, and I'll just bring it up in here. I would say this stuff to his face. Mark is difficult. Hard,
Agreed.
huh?
Agreed.
You know, he's hard for me relationally. We are very opposite people in many ways. Do I want to set things up or to use either masculine or feminine conversational and relational tactics to rid him from my life? To me, that's a false move. That's my own safetyism. Does Mark, on the other hand, want to get rid of all the snakes and the people that he think are trying to undercut him? This is the whole problem of the hard thing about heresy and anathematizing someone and bodies and healthy bodies. When do you get rid of somebody and when should you not get rid of someone, and how do you discern that? Because you should make discernments. This is why I think of election as exclusion for future inclusion. It's not an absolutizing either or judgment where you get rid of somebody. They are bad, they are evil, out forever. I think proper discernment is like, this isn't working. We need to separate for a time. It's not an absolute judgment against you in a condemnation kind of a way, but like, it isn't working. And I'm the kind of person with this is Joey's good critique of me. I'm so open and I'm so relationally codependent that and self-admittedly, like a psychopath could take advantage of me. I would just let them take advantage of me because I would just refuse to make that discernment. I would just be like, I'm not going to do it. Kill me. Fine. Like, I don't care. You know, that's my kind of extreme, I don't know, call it what you want. Extreme faith, extreme Christianity, stupidity. I don't know what you want to call it. But anyhow, Michael, what up? I'm going to keep reading comments. What do you have to say, my friend?
Well, I just wanted to pop in and I don't know if you saw, because I left a comment when you were talking about all the fatherhood stuff or whatever the other day, because when PVK took the little clip from the other day when I was saying like, I just want the good friends that I want, like not to talk to the boring guys or whatever at the party, and and so people will start talking about that or whatever. So I just made a thing, and I made a video, and I tagged you in it. So I didn't know if you I don't think you. I'm assuming because I didn't get a comment that you hadn't had a chance to see it. But it was called like what I want my new friends to know about me, and it was really, and it was me. It was kind of funny because everybody's talking about their dads and stuff, because that's what I was talking about, because I've been wrestling through a lot of that stuff, and it's weird, like, because like, and I think some other people have said it here, like, by comparison to all the stories you hear, like, my parents are amazing parents, but it doesn't mean that they didn't still screw up and that I don't have to figure out how.
Yeah.
And it was really good. Like, cause so I, had some stuff come up between me and my dad, and then like uh, there was some stuff that like he didn't know stuff that he didn't know that how it affected me when I was a kid. And I
Yeah.
told him I forgave you a long time ago. It's like we don't have to, it's not like there's no problem between us. But but even still, it was like he didn't. I guess even though like I had forgiven him, he didn't have the chance to say I'm sorry and repent or whatever that. So
Yeah.
anyway, so we had our like crying moment and stuff. But I was just thinking because like there's people that like to I think there's a lot of people with this like hard times making
Yeah.
uh strong men and all that stuff, and like I think there's a lot of people that like to like sit in that weak man like victim thing.
Hmm.
um you know but you but we do need to like go there somewhat. You need to go in there somewhat. And
Going where?
like just into the fact of like you were a kid and you didn't have all kids get affected by stuff in like ways that they're not ready for, and it may take and you need to like revisit some of that stuff or whatever, like. And so it's okay. I don't know if you do you ever listen to Andrew Peterson music?
I know who he is. He's got the whole Wingfire series or whatever,
Yeah,
right? My
Wing Feather
kids,
thing.
Wingfeather.
So
My kids read
yeah,
all those.
they're good, but he has an album. It's called Light for the Lost Boy.
Okay.
And he wrote a couple. So he wrote like one about. He's written a couple books. One, his most recent one was like fairly autobiographical about his spiritual journey and stuff. And like uh he wrote a song that was after he read like the book The Yearling, which is really just about like a kid having to grow up, and like his dad is not like his dad's like the best intentions guy. He just physically is like has some weakness, and it's an amazing book because it's like one of the best father figures I think I've seen. In the relationship between the father and the son. But basically, it's just like you got to go. It's okay to like the kid had to grow up and like be the tough man and all that stuff, but we we need to take a minute sometimes to like pause and go back and weep for what happened or whatever. And so
No, totally. That reminds me of, so one of my first friend in this world was Jeff Pace. I saw his conversation. I think it was, I mean, really early pre-BOM conversation with Paul. I think they talk about C.S. Lewis or something. I don't know. Jeff's had a few combos, and he was around a lot more in the early days. He still keeps up, I think, a little bit, but we used to talk a ton. We don't talk as much anymore. And I was essentially, so whatever. My last live stream, I talk about how much I love my dad and I'm thankful for him. But there were a lot of times in my life, I would say for, I don't know, half of my adult life or so, I I struggled with my dad a lot. I very much was mourning the father that I never had, or the father that I wanted him to be, because it was that. My dad always used to say, this is a way I introduced my dad to people. He'd be like, "Who sired you, boy?" Because he was a cattle rancher, and he's just like, essentially like, "Where the hell did you come from to sire a calf?" And because I am weird, like both of my parents are not intuitives. Like both of them are fairly conservative, uh, like not open to ideas in general, conservative in every way. I grew up in rural Western South Dakota, which is just a conservative culture. um, I grew up really, I like philosophy and stuff like that. I mean, I didn't even know that until I was older, but like I'm a weirdo. I'm a very weird person for where I grew up.
And so he was just like, what the heck? I'm sure my dad for most of his life was just like, who the hell is this kid? Like, how did this happen? Why? Like, why is this my child? Where did he come from? So he didn't like, my dad wasn't the dad who just like saw my gifts. Like even my parents to this day, I don't like, they rarely, if I don't know that my parents have ever said like good job to me about like anything that I've done, or like or like told me a strength that I have. Like the way that and this, I mean, this is a lot of the safetyism and fear. A lot of their love for me was all rooted in like fear, especially my mom with like a lot of anxiety. They were like, we will criticize the things you've done wrong to like guard you from the bad, but they were never fostering the good, essentially.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Jeff about that, and then just feeling bad. This is like when I was kind of coming around, probably, and not resenting my parents, but appreciating the good ways, that because that's just love. It's just love from fear, I guess. And Jeff told me, and this was a really helpful thing. He's like, it's okay for you to mourn and to be sad about your father not being the things that you want him to be. Like, that's a fine thing. That doesn't mean that you have to resent him or not appreciate him for who he is and was. And that was a really, I don't know, that just like that was kind of like the feminine that gave me the space to like actually deal with that, to not be in denial that that's something I was feeling,
Yeah.
and I think that you have to do that. I think that's true.
And saying, I'm like, I wonder if you're you're probably not really weird, but like wherever those like things came from, like in that culture and whatever, they probably just got stomped out a lot quicker. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's like, there's something that happens when you're 5 or something, and then you're just like, well, you're like, I can't ever talk about that again, and like, so I think it's like those are the things that's why you need some of that stuff, because like it's, I read the Richard Rohr book after I heard John Van Donk talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always like, don't hear. I don't know why I still like think I should like actually take this advice seriously. But when the people that are like, don't listen to this or that person, like, because it's like, so the people are like, don't listen to Richard Rohr. It's new age. It's gonna blah blah blah. And I was like, I think I'll be okay. And so then I read it, and I could easily see though why. Like, it's the sort of thing where a lot of guys could just like park out there and just be like, latch on to Richard Rohr and like, Richard Rohr is my father now, and then just stay in that place. And it may be good. It may be good for some people if that helps them to bring other people, but I don't think it's probably a place most people can stay in perpetuity.
Well, dude, Andrew, I want to hear what you have to say, but it's always, to be blessed is to be cursed as well. So Richard Rohr is blessed, and there's certain things you're going to learn from him that you're not going to learn from other stuff. But like, doesn't mean it doesn't have blind spots and deficiencies or whatever, that's just always the case. So, Andrew, you're muted, but love your comments. What do you got to say?
Yeah, no, I just was going back to that Iron John, and that's kind of that story. You have the child that heals the wounded man in a way, the child that's within, and just your story with your father. You were going back to that. I mean, it's almost like you're the healing, but almost the symbolic system he can't break out of or see. It's almost like that constantly, and I think that's, as men, we're constantly trying to heal the wounds of our fathers, but we never get that recognition in a way. But sometimes we get it in other men, and that's what kind of leads us to them. But I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's it's funny because then my wife and I say that, I don't know, I feel like, and I think my wife would probably agree, that one of the biggest errors that we've made in parenting, and it's almost like the pendulum swift, like you come back this way so hard, that we talk to our kids way too much about stuff and try to hear them out and hear their feelings and like where they're coming from, because my parents didn't really do that. But now what we found is like we just, you get in these cycles of just like endless discussions about things, where I've found Like they're not, we end up getting in conversations with our kids where it's not really about in a healthy way expressing what you feel and trying to have a dialogue. It's these weird it's these weird indirect manipulative conversations. Because I always say this to my kids, is like, right now we're not participating in logos. You're trying to talk to me just in a way to manipulate me to get what you want. And that's not the purpose of language. The purpose of language isn't to manipulate the other person to get them to do what you want. And so, and I don't know, we get into a lot of those cycles. And so like, in a sense, we've almost like swung back. It's not a complete, like, because I said so thing, but it is that. Like I tell my kids all the time, you are not submitted to my ability to reason out to you why I want you to do X or Y. You're submitted to me. Again, it's a personal thing. Like if it doesn't ultimately at the end of the day matter that it doesn't make sense to you. And yes, could I be wrong? Sure, but I'm your father. So like, it's the way
But I
it is.
mean, doesn't that seem like that's what happens with all teenagers, and that's why they then reject and get somewhat of they get that enjoyment to push back against that system that's been laid upon them in a way, like that they're breaking out of this form of being they once knew, but to get a whole new structure and way of seeing, but that's very chaotic to go about, and that's what causes chaos to parents trying to bring back in structure to a teenager's life. But I mean, this goes back to, hard men make easy times, but then these easy times create artists, poets, these type of people that want to get past the hard men, and they reach beyond something, but then it creates hard times again. Then these hard men come about again. You see what I'm saying? In this dialectical tension back and forth, that it's not a scale, it's a constant excess and lack. There's not a balancing act. And that's where I think sometimes people try to navigate. They think it is this balancing act. And that's where I see with Freud and the death drive, like you're bringing up, it is this almost crashing of the system to almost kickstart the system again to get it going, because it needs that almost. And that's where I think religion and philosophy have a hard time dealing with that kickstart, that this system crashing thing that takes place when people who come up with a whole new language. That's why I like your live streams, because you have this whole new language and people are like, what the hell are you doing? But then as you stick with it, those pieces start to mold together, and it creates something new. But again, a parallax shift takes place. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, hopefully. I mean, I hope that's what I'm doing. So there's a question here. How do you teach your children to embrace suffering? So I have a hard, I don't know. I tend to be more extreme probably than most people. So like this whole week in Minneapolis, it's been, I think basically this whole week, or at least 4 of the days, it's been about 0 degrees. So my kids go to school at a walkable distance. It's pretty close. It's like a few blocks. But it's been like 0. And so normally, this is where it's hard. There's all these cultural tensions. Like I would make them walk to school if it were just me. If I were a single parent and there weren't other people around, because we have this really nice neighbor, but I think of it as like a well-intended, a little bit of a malevolent mother, where like if he's out seeing them, he'll stop and offer to give them rides. Because sometimes we've had them walk to school before, but then people who they kind of know will stop to give them a ride because they're just like, it's cold, and they're well-intended people. But then also at the same time, we've told our kids, I mean, you're trying to prevent against, we say like tricky adults instead of like bad adults or something, because that can happen. Like somebody that could just like pick you up and kidnap you, and then you're just gone. And so, you don't trust strangers. You shouldn't get into cars with strangers, or even people that you kind of know, like you get in cars with your grandparents or with me. So we don't really want them to get into cars with other people. And really, it's like 2 blocks, because essentially that's it to answer this question. If you prepare yourself, if you wear like a face mask and a hat and gloves, it's like 2.5 blocks. Like you're going to be fine. Even if it was like -20, you're going to be fine. You're not going to die, and like you're usually walking in pairs or something anyhow. And so like it's not the end of the world. That's the kind of thing that you should readily just do to just essentially not be a weakling in the world. Like, that's not that big of a challenge, you know? But it's hard because people nowadays, again, because we live in a society of kind of like coddling, you know, the coddling of the American mind or whatever, the coddling of the American body, that book. People are so soft-hearted or whatever and well-intended that like they just can't imagine a kid walking 2 blocks to school in 0 degrees. Well, kids, like the guy that lived in this house when we grew up, he used to walk like completely across. I mean, where they went to school, where he went to high school, was probably like 3 miles away. And they would walk to school, back for lunch, back again, and then after school, year round, all the time. No one was giving them rides. Minnesota winters, you know, it's just like, that's just what they did. And so, like, I don't know. I often find that it's a balance. I really try. I mean, I try to model that stuff. You know, I try to. I exercise consistently. I tell my kids that kind of stuff all the time. It's just like, I I grew up with all these sayings because I grew up in like a wrestling town. I grew up in this tough culture of like, pain is weakness leaving your body or whatever. I'll say stuff like that to my kids, but I also try to exemplify it. You know, I do like intermittent fasting every day. Sometimes I'll do extended fast. I try to do hard things, you know, that I try to make decisions that aren't just like easy things. And I try to model that. I try to model that in relationships. You know, I don't just avoid people that are difficult, you know. I don't know.
No, I mean, it reminds me of that. Have you seen Shane Gill's last comedic thing? Or I don't know if his last one, but he says, he goes, if you want to get people to respect the transgender community, he goes, if you just had a really good football team of transgender people, then and they came and like beat Alabama, then everybody be like, oh man, those are some tough transgender, you know, like that type of saying that.
Yeah, those are some tough
It's
guys.
almost like
Yeah.
exactly, and yeah, it's almost like you got to live in both worlds. I think that's what Christianity does in a way. You know, it does that, extending yourself beyond the world, you know, and that's where I see the positive side of Christianity, that it reaches into, you know, African community, or like Paul says he went to, you know, South America and lived there, but that community changes him. That community changes the way he sees the world more than how much did he change them as much as they changed him? It's this interplay that is constantly going on. And that's almost where I see and if you're going, you know, to preach the gospel, how much more is the gospel? Their good news going to change you in a way that, you know, you're bringing them, if you're truly, you know, Christ-like, but I don't know.
Yeah. You know, I think it's interesting how that thing, you know, and thinking about that like whole pendulum swinging thing.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's interesting, like, because I think so much of this stuff will last for a long time via just tradition or culture or custom. You know, it's like that Paul put out that clip from that conversation he had about the guy going to summer camp, and like how it had all this tradition and stuff, but then it kind of like people are like, why do we do this? And then they just kind of canceled everything, which to me, like, it shows like the tradition is powerful in preserving those things, but you also have to continually like examine why, and maybe make small adjustments here and there because you see the changes coming, because otherwise it just limps along for a while, and then it's useless, and that's what you have. You know, I think so many people are walking away from, people are not becoming inherently less religious or spiritual, but they are walking away from these institutional forms of religion in such numbers because we finally reached the part where the tradition makes no sense outside of that context. So I actually had a talk with Pete from Strange Theology, you know, and I was saying, like, I think that's like with the evangelical church, we're like on the edge of that now. It's like you can live in evangelical church world and you'll be okay, but because it's an insular community, if it doesn't figure out how to like cope with what's to come, the same thing will happen. I mean, it's
Well,
starting to happen in some places. It's still working well in others, I think. But
well, that's totally. I mean, that's the wall. That's like what I was talking about with the heresy in the walled garden. It's the reason it doesn't work anymore is it's such an insular community. It has no life coming from the outside. They've gotten rid of all the troublemakers, the heretics, everybody that doesn't just do the group think. That like it only works when you live in a culture that supports that. But if you get anything that's different, it will break down. I mean, it can't operate, you know, which is, yeah, that's what's happening with evangelicalism and any church community that I think doesn't to some degree canonize the heretics, see the need of the difficult people, the outsiders, the difficult things. But that's why it really is. I don't have an answer for that question of heresy. I really do think heresy isn't propositional. That's that article from Greg Boyd and Frank Viola that I love so much. It's adverbial. It's how you behave. Are you a schismatic? Do you behave schismatically? That's what a heretic is. But discerning when that is really, really hard because again, you will move. That safetyism will make you move to a place where you're creating this kind of dead insularity, and that's not what you want.
Yeah, and that's I mean, I don't think so. Like my wife, I think she's a little fearful about like how, just this question of like how do we get our kids to like raise them and still love God, and so you know she wants to get like these like catechisms for kids and stuff, and I'm like, okay, no, let's just teach them the stories and let's just have them love the stories, but not turn the stories into morality, like and then like when they start asking those catechism questions, then we can like look at what those things have to say. But I think you know because that's the same thing is how in the religious way it's with the heresy thing is how much of it is kids pretending they understand stuff or if they don't when they are you know open enough to ask a question, getting that door slammed in their face because they said something that was you know against the dogma. And so we really need to like foster that thing. But then on the other hand too, it's like it is interesting, like you do need those, I think you do need like discipline, but not just for the sake of like crafting good behavior. Like because I remember, you know, it's funny because Jordan Peterson's parenting advice or whatever, it's like this, it's like that classic scenario about like kids not wanting to eat their dinner or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like you know have had the same thing with our kids, and at different times, different ages or whatever. And like you know it's funny because like when you're talking to like a 3-year-old kid and you're like, who's the boss? And they're like, I'm the boss. And I'm like, oh really? Like how did you get there? Like I'm like, well, you know, we're gonna finish this dinner, like we're gonna do it, and just like I think it's the thing is that like kids you know find these, you know, it's not like I was trying to look intentionally for like when is it not like just about me wanting them to behave a certain way, but when is it them like actually trying to like test the boundaries of the relationship or whatever.
And you got to allow for that as a parent too. It's a huge mistake to not allow for that, I think.
Yeah. And I think when, you know, and the thing is like when I found those, and I think the thing with the food thing is interesting because I think it goes back to Eden, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's a perennial problem. It's one of my hardest problems. My two hardest things,
food rule.
My two hardest things as a parent is food issues, food-related issues, because I'm very intentional about the food that I make and that we try to eat, and I try to have it be really healthy. But it's a struggle because like it's always this comparison. It's the perennial problem. Like, well, everybody else is parents, so that, you know, like because everybody else just like eats apparently Lunchables and Twizzlers all day. And then the other issue that's so huge is the tech screen issue. And you know, and my wife, to her, she is constantly, this little corner is kind of a problem for that too, because she's just like, you're not a great example. You're on your phone all day or listening to something all day. Like I have an earbud in for huge portions of the day, or I'm doing this right here. because
Yep.
this, because I enjoy this. And so like that's a struggle for my kids. And I don't know, I probably justify it because I'm just like, I'm not watching TikTok videos, but like that is a balance too, because I mean, they want the junk food version of being on a screen a lot of times.
Yeah.
But it's a struggle. The older they get, man, it really is. It's very, very hard. And it makes
I
me
wonder-
want to like just get rid of the internet in our house, to be
Well, I
honest.
mean, I wonder though, because even like honestly, the thing, like, because people will say like, that with all this like weird gender stuff, that it's like a social contagion, and so like kids are like obviously getting it from the internet, but how much even of it is the fact that it's the parents who never say no to their kids being on screens and stuff, like because basically I think if you keep letting your kid believe that they're the boss, and they don't want to, it's the scare that I think that's the thing, it's this, if they find out that they're actually the boss, that's the scariest thing in the world, because they're a kid, they don't know how
Yeah.
to do life. And so you either try to figure out how to remind them that you're the boss when it comes to, like, look, because this is what happened the other day. Look, we're having chicken nuggets. It's a kid food that you like. But you do have to actually eat them. And like my older daughter is just giving me like a million excuses, like intelligent excuses. And I'm like, wow, like, yeah, those are all good reasons, but that doesn't matter. You have to do this. And
Yeah.
then and then I think at the end of it, she was grateful that she's not the boss of her. She's not in control. Like that, because that's scary. If you are a kid.
And here's the truth. I want to say something quick, and then I think, Andrew, you have something to say. But here's the truth in what your kid is saying, is there is a sense, because it's not this either or thing. There is a sense in which you are the boss. You are the boss of if you get to voluntarily submit to me as your parent and do what I'm asking you to do, or if you want to be in rebellion against me and serve your own will apart from me. You are the boss. Ultimately, everyone is the boss, because that's what you do. You do one of those two things. You either submit to the proper authority in your right discernment and to the loving authority, or you fight against it. So like in that sense, you are the boss.
Right. But I mean, in that sense, so she's the boss of her will, but I'm the boss of my will. And my will as a father, I want to be extravagantly, like, I mean, when this thing happened, I feel like it was divine providence. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat with her for like over an hour, and we're like, okay, one more bite. And every time it's like, good job, and like, like encouraging her for when she's doing it right. But like, I think that's the way like God loves us. And, a lot of times he's given us a long leash, but then if he needs to, he's going to intervene miraculously if he needs to stop us or protect us or whatever. And so,
Cassandra, I agree with you. But like, I can't, this is what I say to my kids too. My mom would imply other adults don't love their kids. That's why those kids ate junk food and behave badly. That's what I'll often say to my kids. I'm just like, and I don't know, this is my own self-righteousness. I'll just be like, I'm sorry, they don't have better parents. Sorry. I'm just like, or it's not so judgmentally and snarkily. I'm just like, different people have different priorities. They're probably awesome in ways that I'm not. I don't agree with them in the way that they handle their kids' diet, So, whatever. Did I ever tell my dad I'm the boss? No. No. That's just no way. Nope. I'd have been very scared to do that. Yeah, and then Gage says the food and tech issues will only get worse. Cannot be solved at the individual level directly, in my opinion. Resisting and giving in are in some sense the same. The malevolent spirit influences either way. Yeah, I mean, that's how me and my wife feel all the time. We're like, damned if we do, damned if we don't. It's just like such a, and then there's this, it's a huge tension. We just had this conversation yesterday of, it's like, I think of it as like how to be in the world, but not of the world. How do you exist in this world that it's the adronym or an adramist, right? Swimming against the stream. How do you live in this world that seems, because America is just like mammon, consumerism, mindless participation in the machine. That's what largely America feels like. And I hate everything about that. and that's just like the culture, and I feel like, and with kids, it's very, very hard to fight against. It is,
Well, can I jump in and just say
Yes.
that I think you're exactly right, that either way you go, whatever way you go, like, and that's where I love your Pete Rollins stuff, is because that's what, Rollins points to, psychoanalysis, is that
Yeah.
something is going to get pushed down, something is going to get repressed, something is going into the unconscious. And in that unconscious will always return in a symptom. So even if you have the most orthodox way, and the heretic says something, they're pointing towards a symptom that something is missing in your set. The whole structure has a gap, has a lack, like you're always saying. And in that lack, but it's not to, if you push and keep repressing that, where that unconscious is telling you a truth. The ego constantly seeks out knowledge, but meaning is made in truth. Truth made and meaning is made, and that's the realm we live in as humans. And that's where the unconscious comes to give us that
Yes.
piece. And that's where I think, like, your orthodox, the heretic has a symptom to orthodoxy that is saying something. And I don't know, have you ever listened to Brad Jersak?
Yeah.
He's an orthodox guy. Like, he points to that. He says heresy was not something, I mean, in early church that you get burned at. It was just like, no, that's not orthodoxy. We're not against, but it wasn't like you're totally cast out of, you still are, like, you still can come and talk and have that. And that's where
Yeah. We're hearing you.
appreciate about Paul is that he kind of doesn't take that. He leaves it open to the group and love to move. Where and I think a lot of people are pumped to that sometimes because they want you have to set up the signifier, you have to set up the symbolism, and then that's where we move from there. That's the world we're going to see from. And I think that's right to some degree, but something still will be repressed, and that's where Rollins comes in and says a symptom will always arise. And that symptom is to actually heal us. And I think that's where Paul, he kind of is constantly pointing at those things. But that's where I appreciate his, kind of Rollins stuff in a way, but he probably wouldn't say that. But.
Yeah, no, I agree. In this little corner, we should not exercise the shadow. That's a false conservative impulse that I think is very dangerous. Because then again, I think then what this thing was the antidote for becomes the thing that everyone was escaping. And that's I don't want to see that happen. Chad, what up, my brother?
What's up, guys?
I got about 10 minutes, by the way, guys, so I might bolt, but you guys can keep rolling.
That mention of the symptom is huge. I mean, in April 1939, a book was published called Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's basically the entire piece of literature that they have, and that's what they focus on. And but when you're talking about this boss business, I brought up that I wanted to say it's good to discuss, I think, and explore with maybe your family or kids or whatever on the topic of what is freedom, what that really means.
Yes.
And what I've come to is the idea is there's a big difference between being free and being in freedom. And if you're able to discuss that in a way that's meaningful and useful, you could see that free is chaos, and it really only causes pain.
Unrestrained freedom, yeah.
Well, freedom happens in a domain. That's the the
True
suffix
freedom.
there, and so when I'm talking about that, I'm referring to the domain is something like contingent on principles, and so you can either be operating on self-centered principles, which are chaotic, or you can be operating within a multiplicity, which is more of an order. Of course, that can get crazy too, but even then, that's not freedom. So that's all I want to say. Have a good day, guys.
See you, Chad.
I got a video. Go watch it. Bye.
Okay. So Gage says non-confessional space helps to redeem the proper confessional space, perhaps. Yeah, because it's always that tension. I think that's what Chad was saying too, with like freedom and constraint. Is you got freedom needs to be bound, the container, by love, which is a giving up of itself. Because otherwise Christ becomes antichrist. That's always the thing that happens after, is like the solution. That's Orwell. It's the same thing. Doublespeak. Antichrist. It's the same thing. Freedom becomes bondage. Slavery is freedom, and you flip everything. Safety, safety is slavery. Like, and it's whatever, Michael, close us out something here.
Well, yeah, I mean, these are important struggles. I mean, I feel like I can say, like what I kind of started with, being someone who had great parents and great and overall great stuff. I feel like I did experience a lot of these kind of traumas, but like in a microcosm, and I think that's the way it should be. You should, and that's that's part of the rough part about being a dad is I realized like it's my responsibility to let the kids suffer, not my wife's.
I agree, more so. That's the tension of the dad.
And so I should, but if I can figure out how to do it in the right place, the right moments and the right times, hopefully you can maximize the blessing and the love that they get from it, and it'll be not permanent damage or whatever.
I mean, I think it's right. Richard Rohr talks about that, these three boxes of like order, chaos, or order, disorder, reorder. And he talks about that culturally, or even in a family. Like it's best to start out in the box of order, of structure, of some sort of boundaries as a kid. It's even like you see it in the trivium, like grammar, logic, rhetoric. You don't start them in like the rhetoric poetic. I mean, you can. There's some mythical things, but you also teach them this very like ordered, structured thing, sing-songy structures, and then logic, like really intense structure. But then you learn to move outside of that into this new poetic kind of reordering of the structure, so you're not bound in the dead structure. All right, guys. Well, let's see. I'm going to read a few comments here, and then I'm going to go. So I agree with this too. If you are so open with your kids, you risk losing that confessional space with them. I just don't. Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is intrinsic in the nature of your embodied reality. Like we live in a house, we have a family. Me and my wife are together. We have grandparents. We have schools. There's all these built-in structures that are providing a lot of stability for the kids. But I'm very open with them intellectually and confessionally. Like even someone, here's a point I want to make, an illustration. I'm gonna have to cut myself off or I'll go forever. But someone was talking to me the other day. It was a local buddy who doesn't have kids yet, and he was saying he's leery of sending his kids to a school where there's kind of whatever you want to call it, like trans or LGBTQ indoctrination or whatever. And I said, I don't. It's kind of a non-issue for my kids. Like I'm really so open with my kids. I'm not like really anti with that or anything, but like it's gotten to the point where like, again, that is the new confessional boundary. Like I go to my son's high school, like LGBTQ propaganda may as well be the wallpaper. Like it's so plastered all over everything that like very naturally, again, within that culture, the conservative kids will just parrot the propaganda, but the kids who are a little bit independent and think for themselves will just be like, they will naturally question that thing that's just been shoved down their throat that you can't question, in the same way that kids that grew up in a traditional church environment will question that stuff. I'm not really worried about it. Like that stuff will all come out with the water. Like it's kind of a non-issue, you're just somewhat, you got to let things be, which is kind of a theme of this whole thing. I agree, Lance. These are, I don't know, dad talks, family talks. I try to keep it. It's a very notes from a tilt-a-whirl thing. I like philosophy. I like big ideas. But like if it doesn't circle back to the very intimate, practical, personal, relational family, like if it doesn't have legs, if it's just ideas, again, that's why like in this corner, the personal aspect has always been important to me. I get to know Michael. We talk about our families. We talk about our fathers. I start to know you as a person, not just what you think about politics or theology. Sure, we talk about that stuff, but like that's not the PVK corner of the corner has always been about people. It's not an idea group. It's not just like who has the right ideas. That's not what this corner, that's not what this is about for me. All right. I think I want to end there. Sound good?
Yeah. Andrew Peterson, go check it out.
Yeah, I need to check. I'll listen to some of his music. I'll do that today. There's a promise.
The Ballad of Jodie Baxter is like that's the song. It's because Jodie Baxter is the main character in The Yearling, but it's a great song. It's like his life and the book, kind of like he's talking to the character from the book when he's grown up. So it's pretty cool.
The Ballad of Jodie Baxter. Okay, I'll listen to it right when I get out of here. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Peace. Bye-bye.